Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and this is Superhero Rewind Unscripted. Joining me as always is my sidekick, Austin, the Day Ghost. And tonight we're going to tackle the second part of our impromptu history of superhero movies. Last time we got through Batman 89 and Superman 78, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those movies tonight, and also the Superman and Batman franchises in the 80s and 90s at large. Austin, thanks again for joining me for this thing. Oh, can't hear you.
I haven't done that in a long time.
That was very professional. You didn't even have a microphone in front of your face. How is anyone supposed to hear you?
Whoops, yeah, I didn't even notice. Where my microphone is, it's like just under eye line. So it's
yeah, so you're not even looking at it.
Yeah, so I can't even see that it's not there.
Anyway, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I was just saying I'm excited to ramble some more with you about the history.
Yeah.
The history they won't teach you in school, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly not the way we're doing it. It's not going to be handled this super half-assed, completely unplanned way that we're tackling it.
Scattershot.
Yeah, but both.
Mm-hmm.
We I think covered about as much ground as we really wanted to last time, and some things came up that I wasn't expecting us to talk about, and we made some observations that I maybe hadn't heard before, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite a successful beginning, if I do say so myself. We'll see how many parts this ends up going. We're going to do this about every 2 weeks until we catch up to present day, and we're gonna go ahead and start the timer here in a second. We're doing this 1 hour at a time, so there's nothing to watch. This isn't a commentary, but we're still putting the timer on the screen if you are watching this and not just listening to it, because we wanted to do this in just 1 hour parts and see how much we can cram into an hour. We'll make this as complete and exhaustive as possible, although we're not going to, go through every single tiny little detail we know about every single movie. It will certainly be broader than that, and we won't bring up probably every single movie that we know, but we'll talk about as many as seem relevant to the conversation, and especially, the big influential stuff. So thanks for watching live. If you're doing that, feel free to leave a comment as we go. We'll be interacting with folks as we discuss. And as I said last time, if you notice anything any mistakes we make, because we didn't prepare for this. We're doing this from memory, trying to see how much of this history we can remember and regurgitate. And we're only going to use the comments to help us fact check. So if there's something that we get totally wrong, we'll be looking at the comments. You can let us know. And if there's anything you want to add to the conversation, that is absolutely completely welcome. And you can leave a super chat any dollar amount to guarantee that we discuss any aspect of this you want us to, or that we bring up something that we didn't think of that you thought of. But you can leave regular comments as well, and we'll try to tackle as many of those as we can as we go. And thanks for watching this after the fact as well. Okay, so putting an hour on the timer, and here we go. Austin, I want to open tonight a little bit more broadly before we get back to the Superman franchise and the Batman franchise, because we didn't talk about any of the Superman sequels. We haven't gotten to the Batman sequels yet. Because we kind of got to 89, I went, oh wait, are we even going to talk about Superman 2 through 4? Like, it'd be pretty weird to just leave those on the table.
Well, I can sum them up real quickly, and
oh, okay.
I look at both franchises in a very similar light. So,
oh, interesting. Were they just kind of? Oh, you know what? I think I know where you're going with that. Where you like the first movie and then it falls off for you, but then it gets bad in the right way at the end and it turns itself around, right? Is that what it is?
It's that 1 and 2 are so like connected in my brain that they're kind of just like neck and neck. I just like see them in tandem. 3 is the worst one, and then 4 gets really bad and is awesome.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you had that with Returns.
Yeah, I always just see both Burton movies like around the same page.
Oh, wow, okay. So obviously you and I are not in the same place with that, but this will not be review. We're not going to talk too much about how disparate we are in opinions on certain things. But when that does come up, you'll see a tiny little preview for things to come on the Superhero Rewind commentary project. Let me read Bob the Hun super chat real quick, and then I want to ask you a broader question before we get back to the late 80s. Bob the Hun, $5 super chat. Like the Marvel Mania and Batmania commentaries, the beginning will be the best part because the movies worth talking about are first.
Well, I think it's funny because last time we talked mostly about the pulp movies, right?
Yes, and Batman 66, curiously, was a huge subject.
Yeah, exactly. But then, with comics, after you had all the pulp stuff, you have the first 3 superheroes, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. And then on film, of course, you have Superman, Batman, and Howard the Duck. So, it's paralleling, really.
I think the correct way to put this is Howard the Duck got Marvel's foot in the door. Code Geass Anime Fan had a comment that's actually related to that super chat, and I wanted to go ahead and read that. He says, superheroes had a more interesting history before the MCU came along, in my opinion. A lot more experimentation and unpredictability. How much of that do you agree with?
I mean, there's definitely truth to that. There wasn't like a quality standard, but also a lot of the times their quality standard is okay. So when you hit above that, it's definitely more interesting. I'm also just expecting that by the time we hit the MCU, it'll be a 2-minute video and we'll just be you naming off all the movies like the Element song.
That's really funny. I don't think it'll be like that because I think we both have a lot of opinions about the various phases of the MCU, and it's got its highs, it's got its lows, and I don't know. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I think in some, I think for me the highs come more in the middle than even at the beginning. So it's kind of like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But we'll certainly get to that place. Okay, I want to ask you, Austin, a big question before we get to the Batman and Superman of it all. How would you... And again, I haven't given you time to give this any kind of thought, but I want to see if maybe this is something that you've thought about before, or if you can just sort of improvise something in the moment. That's what this is about.
Yeah, let's see.
How would you break up the eras of superhero movie history?
Oh, okay, yeah. So I would break it up in... I think I said last time you have like that kind of weird proto age before Superman the movie.
That's what made me think of this, is you were talking about that last time, and I wanted to see if we could maybe come up with themes and periods for each of the major sections of the history.
Yes, so the way I've always seen it is that you have that proto period, you have the kind of Superman age, you're Superman through just before 89, and then I would say 89 through right before the big Marvel takeoff. So kind of ending with Batman and Robin, but I'm sure there's other stuff after that that fits in. And then you have that like proto Marvel period before the MCU, and then it it's so hard to label things after that.
Yeah, it's kind of just reign of the MCU after that, with like a big DC failure in the middle of that. I don't even know what you want to
Well,
call
and there's
that.
almost like, for lack of a better word, like sub eras in the middle. You have like the
Yes.
Dark Knight one, and like the end of the Fox X-Men stuff, and stuff like that in there.
Well, the problem is there's too many franchises.
Hmm.
And too many
Exactly.
successful and failed franchises all thrown in a pot. Like before that, there's little enough stuff that it's pretty easy to break it down based on whatever the big, like actual popular IPs were at the time, right?
Hmm.
So like you can even do this by decade almost.
Yeah.
So like similarly to what you said, you've got that Superman period, but then Batman owns the 90s. Yes, there's other stuff. It's also all, at least a lot of it, looking at Batman. So you could say like Superman is the 80s.
Hmm.
78 into the 80s, and
Yeah.
then Batman is the 90s, and then Marvel, before we have the MCU, what we thought of as, because we thought of the 2000s as like another Marvel period, like Marvel owned that, right?
Hmm.
And X-Men is in there because that is a Marvel property, because Marvel was split off through like 4 different companies. So the 2000s is Marvel owned, and then the 2010s is the reign of the MCU, and then Nolan's Batman is in there, but
Hmm.
it's a trilogy and it's between the late 2000s and the mid 2000s. So even though that is as huge as anything the MCU did, really up until Infinity War, am I right?
Yeah. So it's so hard to say because we're like so close to it, but I'm wondering if there's maybe a chance that we'll say 2008 to 2000 or to 2018 is kind of that MCU period. Then you have the Dark Ages through 2019
Yeah.
to 2024, and then I'm hoping 2025 will be a bump up, but we'll see.
Yeah, because I almost think you could do it. We won't stay on this too long, but I almost feel like you could do like a literary thing with this too, or a comic book age thing if you like. The problem with starting with a golden age is that we think of that really popular period from '08 to the end of the 2010s, at least a lot of people, as kind of the golden age of superhero movies. Don't think of it as golden age in the sense of when there were the best ones, or when they were the most popular. Just think of it as like the breakdown of like actual history,
Hmm.
golden age, silver age, bronze age.
Well, if you
So
were to name
if you
them
put
like
it in
that,
those terms, I wonder what the breakdown of that would be. And where I was going with that is, by the end of it, you get to the modern age, and we are absolutely in the postmodern age right now. That is the only way to look at that.
yeah. Well, the Superman age would be the wheel age, where we've just invented the wheel.
Well, yeah, that proto age we talked about last time, I don't think you can think of as the golden age. I think you have to think of that as like a precursor. That's like BC, right? And then
Yeah.
80 starts with Superman 78. Can we all agree? Can we all agree on this?
Yeah, it's AS and PS, I guess. Pre-Superman.
Pre-Superman and
After
post-Superman?
Superman. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so you have that pre-Superman period. We already talked about all of that. And then the golden age of superhero movies then would be what? Superman, Batman, Ninja Turtles. That's like it's so weird, but that's kind of your trifecta of like the big, influential, popular, modern superheroes that got the ball rolling. I think it's really important, by the way, this is a point I wanted to make last time. Maybe I did say this, I don't remember, that interestingly, the very next movie after Batman 89, based on a comic book, as far as I'm aware, was also huge. Like, I think that's a 1-2 punch that's really important. We certainly talked about this when we did the commentary a couple weeks ago.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely important, especially because it's a big thing everybody knows and a new independent thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because that makes it clear that something is in the air, maybe with the idea of superheroes, and not just things that have been popular for decades.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And Ninja Turtles felt very different, where I don't know how many people at the time were even thinking about the Ninja Turtles as superheroes. I think kids did.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people just looked at it in the same way, we talked about it with the He-Man thing, and obviously that's a superhero movie too, but in that they were looking at it as a film adaptation of a kid's cartoon.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all interesting. How far would you take the Golden Age? See, this is harder to do than what I asked you to do in the first place.
Yeah, no, I think it's easy to like break down different ages. It's harder to name them.
Sure.
I will say the Superman age is the wheel age. We invented the wheel. Batman '89 is the wheel and cart age because we decided that a cart should be attached to your wheel. Uh, the like 2000s is like, I don't know, the ore age. We just discovered ores exist that we can mine. And then I don't know, maybe it's the golden age after that, but who knows? It's hard to say because there's crap mixed in everything.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I would say, yeah, you kind of have to base it on whatever the cream of the crop was, like what the highest standard was.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, if I'm doing the metals, I'm gonna say, not to be confused with Dark Knight metal. If I'm doing the metals, the tough thing is where to put bronze, because I feel like the Golden Age is up through. I would about put it through the mid 90s. I feel like the Silver Age probably starts with Batman and Robin.
Yeah. I can see that.
Or maybe, or no, because we're talking about it as being the cream of the crop stuff, right? So let's say the Silver Age starts with X-Men. That's when you start. You know what? I'm actually gonna print that. I think this is good. I think I'm right about this, because we're very stylized through the 90s, and so we want to be grim and gritty and very much throwing back to pulp and noir. That's the big theme all through the 90s with nearly every superhero movie that comes out, with rare exception. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that later. That's the main point I wanted to make about the 90s. When you get to The Crow, and you've got Darkman just before that, and you've got what did we just review the other day? The Shadow, and the Phantom. And then of course Batman interspersed all the way through there. So you're more, and even Blade is at the end of that decade. It's still doing the noir throwback to some degree, or at least it's very stylized and coming off a comic book page. And then let's say the 2000s, where we start to try to look a little bit more realistic with X-Men, but is still pretty heightened. And Daredevil wants to be that, however you feel about how well that's handled, et cetera, et cetera. So that's like your Silver Age. And then your Bronze Age is the beginning of the MCU. You have to break the MCU up now. It's the beginning of the MCU with The Dark Knight. Begin should have kind of been the beginning of this, but it's all the way back in 2005, so whatever. And then, so you have kind of that break with Bronze, where now people are looking at superhero movies more as like real movies. We have even a new element of realism or believability or groundedness to non-comic book people. And then somewhere within the MCU, let's maybe even say it starts with the DCEU, you have the modern age, which gets up to about where we are now, except I think starting at like just after in Endgame, you have the postmodern age. And I think that's where we're at right now.
It's like the Dark Ages. Like, we're getting nothing but the Black Plague.
Have you read postmodern literature or looked at postmodern art?
Okay, fair enough.
Those are synonymous terms. It's the same thing. Okay, this was fun. We could have made this the entire show. In trying to come up with
the whole history
ages.
in one thing like that, apparently.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we're done. This was fun. 2 parts. That's all you get. 1 hour and 14 minutes. So, Austin, take us back now, if you would, to
play the superhero films that suck.
Back to the past. Take us back to Superman. Actually, okay, we're gonna go back to Superman and Batman. Before we get into the nitty gritty of the franchises, there's actually a question about this I wanted to ask you, which is, why do you think the Superman and Batman franchises, let's just say those first two movies, were as huge for accessibility and modern, and sorry, not modern, and regular movie going audiences? Why did they succeed the way they did? Because that's important in understanding how we paved the way to turn this into a genre and not just a subgenre of action.
Okay, so with Superman, I'm gonna say a thing that goes with both of them is that they're still kind of synonymous at this point as being like the superheroes. So with Superman, I think it's because it comes in, and for lack of a better word, it's just a real movie. Like Richard Donner approaches it like, I think I talked about it last time. Like there was still some of that '66 energy, and he was like, "No, remove that. Like, we need to make this believable and serious." And the thing that not a lot of people talk about, because grounded's become like the an unfortunate word in superhero movies, and that you say that, and it's like Nolan Batman is what you immediately think of. But when you say grounded, really what you mean is just believable. Like you believe it's real. Like it's grounded in believability or like human drama or emotion or whatever.
And that's how Donner Superman was sold. The word believe was very important. You'll believe a man can fly.
Yeah, exactly.
That was in its way making it grounded.
Exactly. So Superman comes in and it's a grounded take that everybody can look at and enjoy. It's also like a film epic in how it's presented, which I think also helped because that was in a period when we still made those. And then Batman, I think,
Yeah, we didn't talk
in...
last time about Star Wars's influence on Superman and the popularity of that, but that is definitely a big part of that.
Yeah,
even if Superman still
absolutely.
comes out, I don't know if it performs as hard without Star Wars.
No, absolutely.
And they sound similar because it's John Williams.
And then Batman is like a few years after like the big takeoff of the franchise, and because we always think about that with the '80s, right? Where it's like, look at all of these big franchises that we especially can't get away from now. And so Batman comes out, and it's like right in the heart of all of that, and it doesn't have like the same grounded mentality, but it's got style. Like for whatever you can say about Tim Burton and those early years, like the man did have style. So like
And it looked wholly original. I mean, you can
exactly.
compare it to things like Blade Runner or whatever in art design, but it was very much inventing something.
Yeah. So like you can watch that movie now and be like, okay, some of the writing's weird, the story doesn't make a ton of sense, but that movie is like oozing with style, and like you can't say it's not an enjoyable film to watch. So like I think it was huge for that. Is my answer for both
I mean,
of them.
James Gunn can, but I wouldn't say that it's not an enjoyable film to watch.
Yeah. Well, and that's also funny too, like in terms of how we can look at things, because I agree with most of his criticisms, and I'm like, yeah, I still enjoy that movie. Like,
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of his criticisms too, but it's all a matter of perspective. I don't know
exactly, yeah.
I don't know what he's talking about with score, but other
Oh,
than that,
I think it's the Prince thing because he says soundtrack.
oh, okay. Because I was like, who's ever dogged on Elfman with that movie?
Everyone reacted that way, and I was like, it's Gunn. I guarantee when he says soundtrack, he means the Prince music.
Yeah, and I should have known that because he's a guy. I don't want to talk too much about Gunn right now, but he's a guy that, of course, uses a lot of incidental music, a lot of popular music in his movies, as we all know. When he says soundtrack, he means soundtrack and not score. There actually is a difference between those two terms. DJ and I talked about that when we did a top 10 breakdown of best scores in superhero movies. We actually talked about the distinction between those two things. But when I see somebody write down the word soundtrack, I just assume that they're not making that distinction. But of course, James Gunn is.
No, and I mean, in a lot of discussion, they are synonymous. Where you just go like, "Oh, the soundtrack of this movie," but you really mean the score. Yeah, absolutely.
So I agree absolutely with the two big things you said for each of those movies. I think both of them have really three major things that make them both popular, and you hit on the first one of where I was going to go with this, which is that they both look like real movies. And then the second thing is they're big budget blockbusters that are pushing special effects in a new direction. I don't think you can undersell the importance of both of these movies as special effects pictures. And then the Superman more so than Batman as far as like finding new ways to do things, but Batman, especially for the time, looks spectacular.
Well, it's got the car. The chick's dig. And
you're right. The car is the equivalent of You'll Believe a Man Can Fly in a way. Not that you wouldn't believe a car can drive, but I just mean that like they're both the way the character gets around, and we sell it real hard, especially to kids that way, right? Like kids want to imagine themselves driving the Batmobile or flying like Superman. Those two things are connected. The third thing is the big special star that legitimizes the film. That's really important for both of those movies, and became less so as time went on for superhero movies at large. Like you could sell one without a huge star. Ninja Turtles, the star was the Turtles. You didn't have to have a big name. Nobody knew who Elias Koteas was. Nobody knew who the guy in the Shredder suit was. None of that really mattered. At the time, that might have been like the exception that would prove the rule. And of course, you have at least one, if not more, major actors playing villains in every Batman movie ever, really.
Well, Michael Keaton got to live to be the unknown person as the star, and then the villain you sell your movie on.
That's true. And that's what happens. You either die a hero or you live long. Is that where you're going with that? Or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain the film is sold on.
Exactly.
In Homecoming. What a spectacular point. Isn't that neat, though, that we went full circle that way?
Yeah. No, that's definitely a lot of fun.
I mean, I think it's neat because he's great in both.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because they actually pulled that off when he played Vulture, and he was the best villain the MCU has had. Definitely one of them.
There.
I remember thinking that and saying that when it came out, at the time. I don't know if anything has come out since then that's eclipsed it for me. I'd have to think about it.
Well, mine's always been Ego, which is right before then. So, but I mean, he is up there. He's in my top 3.
Yeah, and you and I have different feelings about that character in that movie. I like him. I mean,
I'm super biased.
But he's not my
Kurt
favorite.
Russell.
You're super biased about Guardians and James Gunn films.
But Kurt Russell more so.
Oh, really?
I love Kurt Russell.
That's fair.
I mean,
yeah,
you probably have like a little bit of that with Keaton.
With Keaton?
At least to an extent, I would think.
Well, it didn't help me like Returns anymore. I mean,
that is true.
I have
or RoboCop. Okay, never mind.
I dislike things Keaton is in. No, I don't really have that.
I dislike things Kurt Russell's in.
But I was gonna say, but on the other hand, it's not like Guardians 2 is bad. I just don't think it's as good as you do.
Yeah,
but it's good.
Yeah. But anyways.
Anyway. Usually we're doing a review show. It's very difficult not to get into arguments, which I find really enjoyable. So, how important is having a big celebrity in with Jor-El and Superman? Sorry, why is that name on the tip of my tongue right now?
Brando.
Brando. Thank you. I kept wanting to say Branagh, and it was driving me insane. Thank you. Marlon Brando. How important is Marlon Brando?
Oh, it's super important. It's as important.
Regardless of how phoned in he did his performance.
That's what I was about to say. Is that it's probably as important as it wasn't important to Brando himself.
Yeah, Alex Barron. Austin would put Ego over Killmonger because he's not a big fan of that movie.
Well, my issue with Killmonger, I mean, we don't really have to get into it, but because I just realized we're gonna go fully off, and we'll get there eventually.
We'll get there. Bob the Hunt, $2 super chat. James Gunn doesn't like Gene Hackman Luther either.
Yeah, and I like Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor, but I also get it because he's the main villain and the comic relief,
Yeah.
and I think he works better in two than he does in the first one.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
And when you look at when you look at two as an extension of one, the way it was originally supposed to be and the way it was filmed, it kind of feels like all roads are leading there.
Hmm. No, and it's got this nice thing where it's like, here's this villain that, did all this stuff and he's kind of a goof. Now here's like a serious villain that's actually intimidating. And like, isn't that scary?
Well, and also, yeah, and keep in mind that Zod is introduced in the first few minutes of the first movie. So if that had been like a 4 or 5 hour epic altogether,
Hmm.
I wonder if people would have had the same complaint about Lex Luthor. Because in that case,
Yeah.
he's not even your main villain. He's got a plot, and Superman foils it, and then you win back around and you find out that the real villain of the whole piece has been Zod the whole time.
Hmm. Which you might like people might have issue with just because it's Lex Luthor, but and I mean we talked about it last time that one of the things with Lex Luthor in that movie is that he predates what most of us think of as Lex nowadays. So
Yeah,
like,
he's not my favorite version either, but just like with 89, I've got some historical perspective
hmm
in the way you're gonna likely handle those things during certain periods versus other periods. Like if uh, if Byrne Superman was already a thing, if Jurgens had already put out stuff in the early 90s, like your Lex Luthor would be different. That stuff didn't exist yet.
hmm
It's like expecting 89 to be the animated Batman. You can't have one without the other.
yeah, yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
not going to happen. Anyway, so we're in agreement that you got to have Marlon Brando, you got to have Jack Nicholson, or somebody of that caliber to sell that movie.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's
No, it's
interesting that it's a villain in 89 that really sells it, and that in Superman it's the father mentor character who dies in the first 15 minutes of the film.
well, and then I think oh my god, yeah, Gene Hackman, because I'm like mixed up now. I almost said Jackman and then I like psyched myself out where I'm like, wait a minute.
It's not that I don't know who Marlon Brando is, it's that I've got 150 other actors in my head, and
Exactly,
some of them
yeah.
have names that are similar. Sorry, go ahead.
Gene Hackman I think was also a big part of that too, because he was also like an established actor, so like there is an element of that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then
I
I
don't.
don't know about Terrence Stamp, like where he is in his career at that
No,
point.
he's not very well known. He's doing mostly stage stuff, and he's doing mostly, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, guys. And he is, British. He's doing movies overseas. He's not doing anything here.
Hmm. No, he's almost more of like, at least from what I understand, and obviously like he was in more film, like a Christopher Lee at that point, where he's just kind of just doing things, but he's got like a real presence.
Yeah,
So like that's why you hire that guy.
like you don't want to call him a character actor, but that's effectively what he's doing.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, as far as Gene Hackman goes, I don't know how much he was really pushed in the advertising the way Brando was.
Hmm. Somebody in the comments did earlier say that he was second billing, so like there was at least that. But I haven't seen any of the trailers for that movie.
Yeah. Second billing. Well, yeah, I'd have to go look at that too because it's been a while. And Jason and I haven't done a trailer video yet on Superman,
Oh, okay, that'll be fun.
so that'll probably be the next one we do, or we'll do like a bigger DC thing with because that won't take very long because there aren't as many Superman movies, but
Hmm.
as Batman and Spider-Man. But anyway, so I don't know. Got that point out of the way. The big stars were really important in getting these things off the ground, legitimizing them, making them look credible, not just kiddie fair things. It stops mattering as much that they're based on comics, and eventually the fact that these things are based on comics starts to actually be a boon for them because it's kind of this unmined potential, this unmined medium that people start going, well, I saw, these movies apparently based on comics that I liked, so maybe I'll try these other things out. But I don't think that really starts to come to bear very hard until the 2000s. So there's stuff that we try here and there through the 90s, but most of them are kind of middling. box office successes, or they totally bomb and don't do very well at all. Your Shadows, your Steels. It's not fair to put those things in the same sentence, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, it is true, because The Shadow isn't anywhere near as good as Steel.
He's kidding. He actually rated that movie higher than I did.
I mean, we haven't gotten to Steel yet.
No, that's true. It might be a legend.
Get ready for the legend.
He's rating on a bit of a curve, really.
I'm just ahead of the curve.
Okay, so we're kind of talking about these franchises simultaneously.
In tandem, yeah.
Which is sort of fun, so let's just keep doing that. Let's get into the sequels more with those movies. Obviously, Batman and Superman have extremely different, almost polar opposite histories when it comes to the way their sequels were handled, or at least the very next sequel, where with Superman, they're made together, which was... I don't think we can underestimate how insanely ballsy that was.
Oh, hardcore,
because it wasn't even expected to perform that well. People didn't. It was like Star Wars, really. Like nobody.
It was like Lord of the Rings, where they filmed all three of them back to back.
Yeah, nobody had any way to know how well Superman was going to perform, and especially because, like you said, and I think this was even still under the Salkinds. Like at first, the idea was go campy, go kitschy, go silly, and when they start going more epic and they bring on Donner, like they're letting him be insanely ambitious and to model it after like a Ben-Hur or something, just as like grand scale as humanly possible, to the point where you need two movies to do the thing. And as we all know, the relationship between him and the producers and the Salkinds broke down. He gets replaced midway through filming. He gets a lot of stuff shot, but nothing like everything. And then a new director is brought in help me out. Just too many names. Yeah, in Robert Lester. And he starts to go a little bit more toward the silly version that you might have expected in the first place, at least in the way he's handling powers and things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what's unfortunate too is because like I said last time, I got this info from Jeff Johns in his interview with Mark Millar, and because he used to work with Donner. And he said that Donner got the script and was like, "Oh my God, they're gonna ruin this movie." Like I liked Superman as a kid. Like I want to come in and not let them ruin this. So there's like this unfortunate thing where he gets kicked off, and then you have 3 and 4, and that is ultimately what happened. And I know later on, I think he was involved with 5, but there was talks of doing a 5 that was gonna scrap 3 and 4 and just be a direct sequel to 2,
which is what Returns kind of tried to do, but was having its cake and eating it too, and it was hard to tell what really counted because of kind of reinventions of characters and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And when I think 5,
we may or may not remember to talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, who knows? I think 5 was also going to be a Brainiac movie, so it just fits right into that legacy of every movie with Brainiac that's canceled.
Well, with the exception of 3, because that was also supposed to be Brainiac.
But his
am I remembering this correctly? That robot thing was Brainiac at one point.
I've always
or is that a rumor thing?
How it could have been Brainiac, but I don't know if that was ever the plan.
Okay. There's always that question about whether any actual comic book villains were ever talked about with those movies beyond Lex Luthor and Zod, who was a super obscure, like, one-time villain.
Well, it's funny because looking back at it now, you go, okay, but why isn't it Brainiac in 3 when you have an evil machine? And why isn't it Bizarro when you have an evil Superman in 4?
Yeah.
So, like, there is places where you can go, like, okay, but why wasn't it this?
And these things all existed. It's not like... And they weren't even new. I mean, both of those characters have been around a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Bizarro is in Super Friends.
And I think Brainiac might be as well.
I don't remember if Brainiac's in Super Friends, but like even the reinvented Burn Brainiac is around by that point. Is it? Oh no, not
No,
by
no, not
3.
by
I
that
was
point.
thinking by 4, and that's like right around the same time. So
Mhm.
no, that stuff can't influence it yet because we're right around Crisis by the time 4 is coming out, right? Isn't
Yeah,
Crisis like 86, 80, 86?
yeah, I think like 85, 86? Question mark? Yeah, I think so.
Schwag's Lover just put in a $2 super chat and says Brainiac is the only other Superman villain people know.
hmm Yeah, the ones that haven't been in anything.
I think there's also a lot of people who don't even know Brainiac or wouldn't if it wasn't for this reputation. Like I actually think that a lot of people know Brainiac because he's almost been in movies. Or because they hear fans talk about how he should be in movies.
That's what I was gonna say. It's because anytime there's talk of a new Superman movie, it's always, can Brainiac be the villain?
I want to say, and maybe it's just because I'm too close to Superman stuff, I want to say actually Bizarro might eclipse Brainiac for villain regular people know.
Probably just because that's kind of in the zeitgeist. It's almost like a kryptonite thing where like I've heard people be like, oh, Bizarro or whatever,
Yeah.
which probably comes from Super Friends.
So you have to give the Salkinds a lot of credit, of course, for getting Superman off the ground in the first place, and then I think that's about where giving them any credit probably ends.
Probably.
Because they didn't know what to do with it after that. They got goofy, they got boring. The problem with the big notorious thing with Superman 3, of course, is that your guest star takes over. And did you know that almost that exact same thing happened with Star Trek 4? It's like really lucky that didn't happen.
No, that's interesting. Because I've heard. Oh my God, I'm trying to think what his name is.
Richard Pryor?
No, it's a comic book writer.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's another thing I learned from Malai's show. He had him on. He was the comic person to be a. Oh my God, now I'm just blanking on words. He was involved with those movies, and
it really does feel like trying to take a test you haven't studied for, right?
Yeah, that was where I learned about that Superman 5 thing. But he said that as the consultant for DC for 3, they filmed all the Richard Pryor stuff first, and then came in and they were like, "Oh crap! We kind of can't get rid of all of this now because we filmed it first."
Yeah,
and it just already exists. So I'm surprised they go back to it for 4. But then it was also canon, so they probably didn't have a ton of money.
Well, yeah, so I was just going to say, and this is just tangentially related, and I'll try not to talk about Star Trek too much with stuff, but...
Oh, Cary Bates. Thank you, Josh. That's his name.
But yeah, Austin, they almost made the same mistake with Eddie Murphy in Star Trek 4.
Really?
Yeah.
And that was just funny because he was supposed to be in Batman. Oh, no, it wasn't. Was it Eddie Murphy?
Yeah, we talked about that last time.
Okay, I questioned it. I was like, wait a minute.
There was that talk about making him Robin or something.
Yeah.
But... yeah, he was supposed to be in you remember the lady with the whales? He was supposed to have that role.
Oh, okay, weird.
There were actually 2 characters that they combined to make her role, I think. Or no, maybe it was the other way around. I forget. But anyway, it's been a while since I looked into that. But yeah, he was almost in that movie, and it probably would have ruined it. Not that I don't like Eddie Murphy and nothing against him, but he would have been the huge guest star, and they probably would have filmed too many scenes with him, just like they did with Richard Pryor. So I've always kind of compared those 2 movies that Star Trek 4 is what could have been with Superman 3 in some way maybe.
Yeah, there's another timeline where it's a really bizarre concept that shouldn't work, and then it
does,
comes
yeah,
together and it does.
Or some Superman story that is a lot lighter and funny, but still works somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because Star Trek 4 is a straight-up comedy, and it's a lot of people's favorite Star Trek movie. It shouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe
That's
the same thing...
Mxyzptlk should have been. Is in this idea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe Richard Pryor could have been
Mxyzptlk.
Mxyzptlk. What a good idea. No, that could have worked.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Every
decide if you're
character
joking
has
because I actually think that could work.
No, I mean that is a character where I think when you think of who do you cast, you inherently go to a comedian, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he could have been great for that.
hmm
What a good idea. I've never thought of that. What a great idea.
Yeah, it should have been him or Gene Wilder because they're connected. So,
And then you could have had, I mean, you wouldn't have with Superman 3 because Gene Hackman wasn't in that movie, but it'd be crazy if you had a Gene Hackman, Gene Wilder Superman movie.
oh yeah, that would have been nuts.
That would have been great. The other place where the histories really diverge with the Batman and Superman sequels, of course, is that Superman has this steady decline both in popularity and in quality, and Batman has this weird ebb and flow thing where 89 is massive, Returns does well, but parents turn on it and people are kind of weirded out by it and it's odd, and so the studio panics and says we've got to make something very different from that. And then Batman Forever is once again this massive cash cow with crazy amounts of merchandising just like 89 had. And then Batman and Robin was pulling the trigger too fast. Kind of like Batman Returns, except
What's almost like to bring it to a modern thing.
Yeah.
I've never had this thought until just right now. It's almost like a Thor thing, right? Where you have Thor Ragnarok, and then you do Love and Thunder, and Love and Thunder is like immediately like blown apart. Everyone rejects it, and there's almost like a question of, but why though? Because they're so similar. Like, at least to me. I know you like Forever more than Batman and Robin.
Yeah, I don't have that as much with Forever and Batman and Robin.
But they are, at least in formula, the same movie.
No, in formula, absolutely. The difference is Batman Forever, in its way, is taking itself a great deal more seriously than Batman and Robin, even though it is still very cartoony in comparison to 89.
Mhm.
And
Well,
then
and I've always
Returns is
said-
like a dark cartoon.
Yeah.
We talked about this last time, but what's weird about Returns is that in its way, it is already going back to the 60s, and we just cannot get away from that moving forward. It's just that the tones are different, right? And I totally respect your not caring for Batman Forever, but I do think there's a bit of a different thing going on. I totally get why you said that. And those are really interesting parallels. I think that the same kind of thing is sort of happening where it's like, oh, that was popular, let's just do the exact same thing again. And the second one is lackluster in comparison to the first one to people. The difference for me is Batman Forever, I think, is, and some of this is nostalgia, of course, but I think that is a watchable movie, and Batman and Robin, while I can enjoy it for how just kind of dumb it is, and it's nuts that it even got made, they're not the same thing. I feel like Love and Thunder is just not that far removed from Ragnarok.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't help that I didn't like Ragnarok in the first place. So it's hard to disconnect like your feelings from like a more objective observation you're making.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I've always said with Batman, with the exception of Begins and The Batman, every Batman movie lives and dies on the villain. So a lot of that's just going to be how you react to those villains. Like, I personally find Riddler and Two-Face really annoying because it's just two people improving at each other, and like it gets really tiring. And then I think Mr. Freeze is really fun, and Uma Thurman's like a unsung hero in Batman and Robin. So it's like I really enjoy both of them. So like I like that movie more. And that's also why I like Returns, because I like DeVito and Pfeiffer in that movie.
Yeah. And I think all of that casting is really good, and then Batman Forever I like more than either of those movies, but Tommy Lee Jones is completely miscast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's trying to act like Jim Carrey, even though he hates Jim Carrey, which is one of the most awkward things to have to watch.
Well, that's why
But I didn't pick up on any of this as a kid.
That's why I find that movie frustrating to watch now, is because I'm watching Jim Carrey play Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones play Jim Carrey. So it's like a really awkward thing.
Meanwhile, you got Schwarzenegger sort of trying to actually play a character, even though he's in a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. Schwarzenegger, by the way, has one of the funniest things I've ever heard in an interview for that movie, where he talks about why people love Batman or why people love Mr. Freeze. I don't know if you ever heard that, but
Well, I remember the whole thing where he's going off about how he wanted to be like the greatest Batman villain.
oh no, this he was like, people really love Mr. Freeze because he is a very sexy character, which I think something I've never heard anyone say about Mr. Freeze.
Ever.
No,
No, that is new to me.
it's a really funny clip. I'll see if I can find it later.
That's great. The other big difference in the two franchises, and it's interesting because they both got 4 movies, and that all 4 Superman movies were made before 89 came out.
Well, and they also both have a 5th film that almost happened that gets canned.
Yeah.
And then a like 2004, 2005 reboot. I think no, Returns is 06.
Returns is 06
Yeah.
and Begins is 05, and that's also interesting too. Like, it's crazy just how different the histories of these two franchises are, with the similarities that they do have, and the fact that one follows another immediately, and then you have like we said earlier, the Superman period and the Batman period. So you have a reboot, like you said, in the mid-2000s for Batman, which is a complete reboot, which confuses people, and some people go to Batman Begins and don't understand what's happening because it's blatantly contradicting things from the previous franchise, because the idea of a reboot was new. And I think that's an important thing to discuss when we get there. So we'll just kind of put a pin in that. But I think for a lot of people, Batman Begins was the first time the notion of a reboot entered their heads. And
Well, it
then
kind of kicks off a whole other thing outside of even superhero movies.
Yeah.
With the big like reboot era of the mid 2000s. And then it's just unfortunate that Superman isn't that, because there's a completely different history if it was.
Absolutely there is. And you could have maybe even seen a successful shared DC universe much, much earlier. I mean, this is another kind of fun what if idea, and I don't remember if this question came up in the what if show I did a year or two ago, but I did a live show where I just had people bring me what if history questions, like of different things that happen in superhero movies. What if you get a successful Superman Returns in 2006, and then Warner's immediately goes, oh, okay, let's build a shared universe from this. Now, they may not have done that because Batman Begins was successful enough and they were working on Dark Knight, but however they did it, like whether it started a thing or they actually blended those universes, like a lot of people really wanted them to do, which I thought was nuts. Like, people wanted Superman Returns to be in the same universe as the Dark Knight. But let's say that had happened before Iron Man comes out. Then what happens?
Well, and then there's also the what if Begins was the one that people were sour on and people loved Returns.
Sure. Yeah.
Are you in more of a place that we are in now where we can't move away from anything that happened before?
Yeah, maybe so. But I just think it's really interesting. Try not to get too far in the future again. I don't want to get stuck in 08 because I have a hard time not doing that. I'll just talk about that year forever because it's so interesting. But going back to just the differences in the franchises, it's really interesting that you get a full-on reboot for Batman, a soft reboot for Batman Returns, and one of them was one of the most successful franchises in history after the Batman franchise, which did really well up to Batman and Robin. And then Superman once again completely peters out, and we don't get anything for another decade? Almost decade. Like,
well, it's also interesting because Superman almost had a full-on reboot, because they were also kicking around Superman Flyby for a while.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, which would have been a very strange movie, because that was the one that had like the Kryptonian kung fu and was like very Matrixy.
Oh, you know what else is really interesting? Yeah, I've never read that script. I've always wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very weird from what I understand, and that was J.J. Abrams.
There's almost the exact same number of years in between the reboots also for Batman and then Superman respectively, if you consider Superman Returns as sort of kind of in the Donner universe, which is whatever, because I don't. I like to look at it as one of those things where the Donner movies are, how do I want to put this? For Superman Returns, those first two movies are sort of canon, but that movie is not canon for the Donner movies, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But but between Batman and Robin and Batman and Batman Begins, there are 8 years, and between Superman Returns and Man of Steel, there are 7 years. That's interesting.
That is weird. You know what's funny though? I just had this thought. Is that J.J. Abrams was going to do Superman with Superman Flyby, which would have been like very post-Matrix, early 2000s. And
then maybe he would have never gotten Star Wars, and that would have been great.
No, but then instead of that happening, we got Bryan Singer doing Superman Returns, which is just fan service and hey, remember this movie that exists?
Yeah.
It's like they directed the wrong film.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, no, that's true. And it kind of, Superman Returns kind of feels like what he really wants to do is a shot-for-shot remake like Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, exactly.
At one point, I tried to do the best calculation I could, and I think I got to where like 10% of the dialogue in that movie is completely lifted from previous films. It's not quite that much.
That's the one I saw first. That was the first movie I saw in IMAX. That was Superman Returns.
Bob the Hunt put in a $2 super chat and says Mixelplick was also going to be in one of the sequels. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
So I don't know which one it would have been, but it would have been funny if it was 4. Sure, Sue, I'll get rid of the nuclear missiles for you, Superman.
Or Lex Luthor is like, I took your DNA, Superman, and combined it with my own, and what I got was an imp.
And it somehow led me to the 5th dimension.
And then Mixelplex comes out and he's like, yeah, destroy Superman. I will hurt people.
And then the other thing that's kind of interesting in comparing the failure of the sequels is Batman became kind of poison for Warner Brothers, or at least that seemed to be kind of their perception, where, you know, they did kick around making that 5th movie, but I think they were super leery after the reputation with Batman and Robin. I don't know the full details of why 5 never happened, since they were kind of, you know, kicking that around, but I think at least the perception from the outside is they waited 7 years because they were really afraid to do anything with that character after that. Superman, I wanted to ask you, do you think Superman has kind of the same thing? Like, I don't mean reputation of Superman 4 entirely, but just maybe like the combination of 3 and 4, and we haven't had one in a long time, and Christopher Reeve got hurt, and how do you replace him? Like, why doesn't another Superman movie happen for as long as it does, considering that you have the popularity of Batman, and also keeping in mind that you almost did get one in the mid-90s. I guess for a brief second I wasn't even thinking about Superman Lives, but I guess they almost made one.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the biggest shock for me, is that they didn't try to recapture that after Batman. But what I was going to say, because you said the Warner Brothers was, Batman was kind of poison to them for a while. What's interesting to compare them is that Superman's like the opposite, where Superman 3, at least 4, I'm not sure about 3, it was leased out, and the big lesson they learned was keep it in-house.
Yes.
And Batman doesn't have that. They kept it in-house and went down the same path.
Yeah. Where it's still kind of degenerated. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a lot of horror franchises.
No, exactly like that. Yeah.
It's like we keep repeating ourselves. We're kind of losing track of the script. You know, we're forgetting what made these things popular in the first place. We're just trying to knock it out. And then how many superhero movie franchises, just like horror franchises, go down that path? I mean, Ninja Turtles did it.
One, Ninja Turtles was done by New Line, who did that with Nightmare on Elm Street. So
Yeah.
it literally is that, yeah.
And certainly for different reasons, because with Ninja Turtles, a lot of it had to do with kind of like with Batman Returns, complaints from parents about violence and stuff, and so they felt like they had to kind of neuter it a little bit, and I that hurt Batman in its way. Although you would think that trying to go more like wholesome and kid friendly would have done the same thing to Batman Forever that happened in Ninja Turtles 2 and 3, but it didn't. It did the opposite. That movie was huge. And so the real problem came after it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, especially now, because like that wouldn't happen. Like after the Batman, or the Dark Knight, no one was complaining it was too dark for kids.
Well, we just live in a different era now, too.
No, exactly. It's just unfortunate. But I think that's why I like Returns more than Forever and Batman and Robin, where like that movie is a mess, like it just is. But it's more interesting to watch and look at because it's an artistic piece that somebody wanted to make. And Forever and even Batman and Robin, which I like for essentially being a meme, is just like I just see the studio notes. Like I don't actually see a movie being made.
Yeah, no, and you're not wrong about that. Although I think Batman Forever is a little bit better than that, just because there was at least an attempt at getting into Batman's head and making it kind of about that character. It's thin, but just compared to what had been done with it before, at least there's an attempt at a character arc.
Yeah, well, the biggest issue with that is
give him some motivation. And Val Kilmer is a really good casting choice.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest issue with just that as an idea is just that a lot of like his character arc is kind of left on the cutting room floor. Like the most important thing
didn't make it into the movie. No, I know. It's unfortunate.
Maybe if that Schumacher cut comes out, it'll be the vastly superior movie. But just as is, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I if that ever comes out, I'm very curious to see how different it could possibly be.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I'm skeptical about how much more could go back in it, but
yeah, no, that is a movie I would watch day one just to see because I'm too curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've only got 3 minutes left on the clock, so what major final thoughts should we throw out about this section? We did what we set out to do here today, by the way, just getting through the Batman and Superman, the franchise in the sequels.
The last thing I just want to throw out with Batman isn't even necessarily like a history thing, but it's an alternate history, which is something I think about quite a bit, and I just wonder, which is, if that franchise kept going, like, is it just like James Bond, where it's like every movie we bring in a different villain, and you never really repeat them? Like, you'll get like maybe like movie 8 is like the Mad Hatter movie, and then after that you'll get the Killer Croc movie, and then the Ventriloquist movie.
And maybe we would do the same thing with Batman that we do with 007, where you'd have a guy that would do 4 or 5 of them, and then you'd replace him, and certain parts of the history might come back occasionally, but it's basically a real loose continuity.
Yeah,
that's where we were with Forever and Batman and Robin. Yeah.
Well, I've always said America's always been looking for their James Bond. Like that big 20 film long franchise that's just constantly running, and Batman was definitely another attempt at that.
I think it was another attempt on accident. Which is really interesting. Like, I don't think there was anything deliberate at all about the way that happened, but it could have become deliberate if it continued and became a tradition. Absolutely. And that would be kind of ironic considering that Adam West was approached for Bond at one point.
Yeah.
And also considering how Batman and Bond chase each other's tails constantly, and we'll have to talk about that when we get into the Nolan era. Because, as you said, that kind of starts the reboot craze, and Bond falls into that. So you don't get the way Casino Royale happened without Batman Begins, because in its way, Casino Royale is Batman Begins, and Skyfall is Dark Knight.
Yeah, well, yeah, Nolan Batman is very Bond, and Daniel Craig Bond is very Nolan Batman. So
Yeah, they're just
absolutely.
it's just a snake eating itself. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So the next Bond will just be the Batman.
I yeah, the 90s would look very, very different, of course, if Superman 3 had been a better movie. Or at least maybe it would have been different. Like if Christopher Reeve kept making those and they were at a quality. Let's say Dawn of Superman 2 comes out the way he intended it to, and it's heralded as yet another masterpiece. Does he stick around? Does he keep making Superman movies? Do we get 3, 4, 5, and they just stay of a quality? And if that, I guess now I'm also just talking about alternate history, but it's interesting because if Superman doesn't peter out the way it does, Batman could or could not still happen somewhat similarly. Maybe Batman gets made earlier and it is a very different movie if Superman remains successful. That's a thing to think about. And then the other thing is, do you get this kind of dark period in the 90s? I don't mean quality-wise, but I mean where, and some of this is, what's in the air, what's happening in culture, what's happening in politics and stuff, certainly, but when you look at the 90s, it's all about, again, throwing back to pulps and there's also a little bit of a reflection for what's going on in comics. We're really interested in anti-heroes right then. And there have been more of a variety of different kinds of superhero movies through the 90s if Superman had stayed popular. And if those franchises had... we're past the timer now. I'm almost done. If those franchises had overlapped instead of one coming after the other one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I've always said the saddest thing about Superman is that, because with Batman, it's like Michael Keaton's a good Batman, but there's definitely other actors I can see in that role and ones that I like more. Christopher Reeve is Superman. So, like, it is sad that his movies peter out in the way they do. And especially that we didn't get to see Christopher Reeve in, like, a more comic booky Superman movie, that went to some of those places like Mixoplex or Brainiac or Bizarro. So absolutely.
You kind of got to wonder how much Christopher Reeve even knew about the character's supporting cast because they used so few characters from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder.
Okay, we are cheating if we keep talking, so I will answer these super chats. And before that, I just want to say, next time, Austin, what do you think I think we should keep doing this. We'll let it go the direction it's going to go, but let's kind of come up with a goal and for like how far we think we want to get and what we mainly want to talk about, because you still have some comic book movies, some superhero movies through the 90s that we like lightly touched on but didn't really deal with much. I don't know how much of that we want to get more in depth with like the pulpy movies with Ninja Turtles and all of that. So do you want to plan to do a little bit with that, if there's anything else we have to say, but then kind of get into what? Fox X-Men in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I assumed that...
I don't think we can do a whole hour on the 90s apart from Batman.
Yeah. Maybe it'll be like the 90s and Blade, and then maybe like a start of that stuff. Because I feel like X-Men and Spider-Man will probably end up being what this was for Batman and Superman.
Yeah. Maybe so. Well, and X-Men, of course, is going to be a super interesting franchise because I meant to say this a little bit earlier, but when we were talking about like franchises deteriorating, X-Men starts to do that and then turns it around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the first time we saw that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me read these
It's weird too.
Sorry, go ahead.
Like starts from a place of reboot, but not really. So like that'll be interesting.
Well, it was like Superman Returns if it worked.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
In a weird way. Kind of, sort of. Except by going backwards instead of forwards.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't understand doing a movie where it's about going to the future with a Superman that has left Earth for a while. He comes back, he looks way younger than he did before. I don't understand that.
He went through a black hole.
Okay, did the Earth go through the same black hole? Because Lois Lane also looks younger?
She went to the weekend retreat that she was going to at the end of 3. It turns out 4 actually takes place before 3, and that's what happened. Oh wait, those movies aren't even canon, so never mind.
No, those don't even count. Well, then there's the fact, of course, that those movies blatantly take place in the 70s and early 80s. Like, they're very rooted in that time. And then Superman Returns is trying to be this more out-of-time thing, and it doesn't work. You can't do that.
Well, then that's like the 2013 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the opening is seconds after the first movie, which is like a mid-70s movie, and then it jumps forward like 20 years to the year of 2013.
That would have been really overthinking it. Chewbacca's Lover puts in a $5 super chat. Yeah, Chewbacca's Lover, we knew this. We just didn't happen to mention it, but that's what we were referring to when we were talking about the Batman Forever cut. He says, Kevin Smith has seen the Schumacher cut, apparently said it was brilliant, if that's worth anything. Yes, we're aware of that, but we didn't happen to bring it up.
To be fair, Kevin Smith cried at the season finale of The Flash. I don't trust Kevin Smith.
I don't trust him either. I mean, it's good to know that, and no disrespect to Kevin Smith, but like, his saying it's brilliant doesn't give me any reason to expect that there's a ton of new footage or anything.
Yeah.
I just don't trust that. I bet that cut is 10 minutes longer. Maybe.
I remember
and that's being generous.
Screened, I read like a full breakdown, but it's been so long I can't remember.
Was there much of a breakdown? Like, was there quite a bit that was different?
Oh, yeah. No, I think it was like a breakdown, just the full movie too. So it was like, here's the differences, and then like how it fits in. The only thing I remember is just that it keeps the opening with Two-Face, where there's like a guy hanging, I think.
Okay. Well, I mean, to be fair, the Spider-Man 3 editor's cut also had that breakdown, and that movie was not different enough for me to suddenly like it more. So
there was at least extra scenes though.
Yeah.
As opposed to the editor's
but
cut.
I guess for me personally, because I know that we come at Batman Forever differently, Spider-Man 3 is a bad movie that I would have loved to have seen greatly improved. Batman Forever is a flawed movie that was a real special thing for me when I was a kid that you could only make a little better. So I mean, like, I'm all for seeing a thing that improves on it some. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What I mean is, it's going to be harder to make me like Spider-Man 3 very much more. Like, it would have to be very, very different. Like, Daredevil director's cut different. Batman Forever, you could add that one great scene that suddenly makes me love that movie more than I do already. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No, that's true. And Spider-Man 3 is Batman Returns to me, and then Amazing One or Forever, and Batman and Robin. I blanked on the title. except if Batman and Robin was genuinely crap.
We have a couple more of these to answer real quick before we call it a night tonight, guys. And thanks for the support, and thanks for all the comments. I may try to answer a couple more comments from earlier, too. Bob the Hun, $5 super chat. If that fifth Batman film came out in the early 2000s, it would have been super influenced by The Matrix. Am I wrong? It would have had slow-motion batarangs. I mean, who knows? It's hard to say how that movie would have influenced that movie. Certainly, how The Matrix would have influenced that.
It was just more of what Schumacher was doing. But obviously, who knows?
Well, no, I think it would have been a huge attempt at pivoting, even if Schumacher had made it.
I agree, but I just mean like a pivot back to like Forever, where it's like reeled back, but like it's still shot like a lot of the same way.
Yeah,
that
it would have been filmed somewhat similarly. Well,
I
actually think there's, but I'm conflicted. I think there's two different directions this could go. Either it's more sober, like Forever, or even more sober than Forever, because it's been a really long time, but I remember reading some details about what was supposed to be in that movie that made it sound a lot darker and a lot rougher. And it could have been shot very similarly to Forever, but with darker subject material. Or it could have been Schumacher convincing the studio that he knows what he's doing and they don't, and they should just let him work without a net. And then he makes something a lot closer to what he wanted to do when he pitched Year One. And you see his Batman a la Flatliners or Lost Boys.
Yeah.
And then all
Yeah, and
bets
I've
are
always-
off. And then it's not going to look anything like The Matrix.
Yeah.
Even still.
Yeah. No, I don't even really think of Schumacher as somebody that would do something that looks like The Matrix, but
I don't either.
I definitely think it would be the first one though in your descriptions.
I
I
do
think it
too,
would be
but it would
a
be
more
really
serious movie shot like forever.
But I do think that there's this slight possibility that the studio would have gone, well, I mean, we rushed you in the last one, so do whatever you want this time. But then, on the other hand, when you make a movie, like, for whatever reason it comes up the way it does, when you make a movie that fails, the director always gets the blame for it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
And there's no way Jeff Goldblum wouldn't have hammed it up in that movie, The Scarecrow.
AMC and some other people were talking about, or were asking about, if Justice League Mortal had released in 2009. That's getting kind of ahead of ourselves. And also, I did talk about that in that What If show. But that is, of course, one of those big, like, $1 million questions. If you get that and it does well, the whole landscape is completely different. It's completely different. The MCU looks possibly very different. You don't get the DCEU or anything like it. I mean, who knows what superhero movies look like right now if that had happened?
Mm-hmm.
And if it was good, especially if it was good. But even if it sucked, the landscape would look different now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no kidding.
Because you would have never had Snyder touching any of it unless, well, you could have still. I mean, if that had tanked, you could have gone back to the drawing board and had Snyder do exactly what he did, I guess. I don't know.
The one thing that would be the same is that Wonder Woman still wouldn't be played by an actress.
Bob the Hun, $2. I just wanted to let that sink in. $2 super chat. Ninja Turtles follows the Superman Returns model. Yeah, sort of. If you're talking about TMNT in 07.
That's what he's saying because he says TMNT. He's talking about that movie.
Much more subtly. Oh, I see. He said TMNT is literally TMNT.
Yeah.
Much more subtly in that the only thing that's connecting that movie to the live action movies is that, like, there's a helmet at the end on a shelf that is the Shredder helmet from those movies, and the fact that it's them, in the future coming back together, kind of like Superman being off in space for 5 years. But if that helmet's not there, there's no connecting it to those movies at all. And you have like a Ninja April. And I mean, like, it doesn't look or feel anything like any of that, but there's that one Easter egg that makes us go, well, maybe it's supposed to sort of be in continuity.
Is there not more? I thought there was an Easter egg to the time travel stuff in 3, but I could be wrong.
Maybe that was also on the shelf, but if so, it was just a couple of things on a shelf. I mean, like, that doesn't.
Yeah, but I mean.
Because you're now that you say that, I think you're right. I think the time travel device is maybe also there.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would have been about as much continuity as like the first 4 Batman movies and James Bond, where it's like you have like the little Easter eggs where it's like those movies still do matter.
But I'm just taking a little bit of issue with following the Superman Returns model, because that is a model is like reinvent some characters here and there, try to make it feel more out of time than the original, but you're lifting entire speeches and you're using the same score. It
doesn't have that.
And so it's very much more subtle about it. But I have made that connection with it before too, that it does feel a little soft rebooty. But Superman Returns is a straight up soft reboot.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's terrible.
I mean, I think both of those movies are boring, but we'll get there in Superhero Rewind.
Both of what movies?
TMNT and Superman Returns.
A TMNT is just a mixed bag to me before it's awful, but
Yeah. That's a movie that I think has like a really good section,
yep.
and then everything outside of that is just kind of boring.
Well, the one thing you can't say about Superman Returns, and of course, apples and oranges, one of these is a CG animated movie for kids, but one thing you can't say about Superman Returns is that no part of it feels like a direct-to-video movie. It all looks nice. TMNT looks okay. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, that movie feels like a video game plot before it's anything. Like, it's got all the hallmarks of a direct-to-video animated movie.
I mean, I wish I could do the Lex wrong yell, but I can't. And there was one other super chat.
I see it. Yeah, $2 super chat. Everyone and their dog wrote a script for Batman 5.
Not my dog, but some people's dogs.
Yeah, I had not heard that there were that many scripts running around for that. I knew there were like a couple, but if there's a lot more, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know like a ton about a lot of those like lost or canceled movies. Like there's certain ones I know quite a bit about, but then other ones that it's been too long.
I've been wanting to do a review series on those for a long, long time. And I mean, I know I wouldn't be the first to the table for that. I mean, there's whole channels about that, but I've not done it.
Yeah.
Past, I mean, I've talked about the, different drafts of Batman and Batman Returns, but that's really all I've done.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good videos. There's definitely a lot that there's enough info about, or scripts. Like we can do the silver and black script.
Oh my god. One thing, silver and gold. One thing that I've wanted to do for a long time. This would be kind of a big project, even if we did it off the cuff, Austin. But I've always wanted to go back and talk about, because not only have I wanted to do unmade scripts, but I've also wanted to do something on documentaries. And I think it would be cool to do one show that reviewed The Death of Superman Lives simultaneously with talking about the script.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. Especially because there's probably like even more info you get out of that documentary than even just the script.
Yeah.
Whether it's like production design and stuff like that.
Yes, of course. Well, have you not seen that?
I haven't, no. It's one of those ones I've always wanted to.
Yeah. We should do that at some point. I mean, it'll be a lot of homework because you got to read a script on top of it, but we should do that at some point. Okay, I think we knocked out all of the super chat. So thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We sure appreciate it. Austin, I am thoroughly enjoying this exercise.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
What is your prediction for how many chapters we'll have of this? How many parts?
Okay, so I'm going to say Spider-Man and X-Men are at least going to be one. And I just mean like in that 2000s period. I don't mean all of both. I
was going to say, do we keep going? Like,
yeah, no, I just mean like that initial trilogy.
Yeah, that's how I want to do it.
There will probably be at least one looking at like that other Marvel stuff in that period, and probably like Blade and maybe some other stuff that like mixed in there. I don't know how the MCU will break down, but
and the DCEU.
Yeah.
And then what do we do when we hit more recent stuff? Like it's really hard to say where all that goes. And also, it's so weird. I'm actually kind of concerned that when we get to the more recent we get, the foggier I will be, even though it came out more recently.
Yeah.
On like the order of everything and
yeah. Oh, don't worry. I got you. But we're getting into the period that like I grew up in, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Like that early 2000s Marvel.
So. Yeah, because everything we've talked about so far, you've had to talk about more in hindsight because you weren't really there for it.
Yep.
I mean, have we talked about anything that you were old enough to see in the theater yet?
No.
Yeah.
Well, Batman and Robin came out the year I was born, so no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 13.
And Batman Forever I didn't see till I was like 13. Um, like I watched the first 2 and 4 like all the time, and then my mom was like, "I hate that movie," so like you never watched the Riddler one, and I was like, oh, "Okay, like I guess it's really bad." And then when I first watched it, I was like, "Ah, this is clearly the best one," and I had that for like 2 years, and then I got over my recency bias.
That's really funny. Yeah, I never quite got over my recency bias when it came to. I'm gonna start. That's a good phrase. I like that. Guys, once again, we appreciate you watching, whether you're watching live or after the fact. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks for another one of these. Next week, I'm dating these when I say this, but next week on the Superhero Rewind Commentary Project, speaking of, it'll be nice to have these fresh in our minds, actually, when we get to the third part of this, because we're doing a double feature on X2 and the Daredevil Director's Cut for the next commentary project. We're going to watch those together.
Yep, and those were 2 movies I watched with my mom, like, I feel like at least once a month.
Crazy.
Yeah, so...
So look forward to that if you're keeping up with other stuff on the channel and other stuff under the Superhero Rewind umbrella. If you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/geekvolution, and we really appreciate all of our patrons. The $10 tier lets you become a Superhero Rewind producer. You get several cool perks there, including getting your name read at the end of every episode of the Commentary Project and Superhero Rewind Unscripted. All of a sudden, Unscripted is like its own show again, Austin. I don't know how long yet. My prediction is 7 shows.
7?
I think it'll be 7.
You want to unite the 7 parts. That'll be that's if we do 7 parts. Okay, now we kind of have to, just so you can release a full cut called the Unite the 7 cut.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I think retroactively, I'm gonna come up with chapter titles for each of these, but we gotta make them before we know what exactly we're talking about. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know if there'll be dates or if there'll be, the periods we were talking about. We had like 3 totally different layouts for that.
Well, I thought it was funny coming into the show today. I was like, oh, Cap used the same thumbnail. Did he change the first one? I guess he must have, because we didn't talk about those movies hardly at all. And then I went back and saw that you did.
I did, yeah. Yeah,
to a more fitting one.
Thanks. When we decided that we wanted to talk about the Batman and Superman franchise this time, I was like, well, I gotta change that first thumbnail because that's a thumbnail for this video. so I had to fix it. Okay. Thanks once again to everybody watching and to all of our patrons, but now we're going to say thanks individually to our Patreon producers, again, the $10 tier and above. And quick plug, you can also join the $15 tier, and that lets you make a request for our show, The Request. And we have several of those as Patreon producers as well. Austin? Mm-hmm. I don't know if I need to go first or second, so you're not reading your own name.
I don't know. You don't just have this timed out in knowledge.
I really don't. So why don't you go first, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. I mean, you can always go a second time when we get there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can do it that way.
We got 1 reply.
And Bill Mills.
Chewbacca's lover.
Doctor. Hello.
Elliot Slater.
Goofster123.
Hayden Spring.
Joe Turner.
Judgera.
Matt Bat68.
Michael Martin.
Stone Gasman.
The Amalgam Nation.
Thomas Edgehill.
Okay, so it's definitely Adam, right? Because I've always read it differently, and then you say Adam, so that is what it is, correct?
I think so.
Because I've always read it as Aid March, but you always say Adam March.
Yeah, well, now that I'm looking at it, it is an E. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But he's been there for
both.
a million years, so
yeah.
I want to keep saying it the way we've been saying it.
Yeah, no, and Adam March is a cool guy.
Look, the man's never corrected me.
That is true. Leave a comment below.
Anyway, so yeah, Adam March. Damon Begay.
Hot soup.
You got hot soup this time. Jacob Schneider.
Jonathan Campbell. I got 2 soup-based ones.
That's amazing. Justin Hayes.
Kareem Roberts.
Matthew Brody.
Michael Austin Gulick.
Miguel Rodriguez. And the day goes.
Me. Unknown passenger.
And finally, Wendell Jones. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for the support. And now we're going to bid you all farewell. Robert Wild says the Ides of Adam March. That's pretty good.
That's good.
All right, folks. We'll see you real soon. I was Captain Logan. This was Austin the Day Ghost.
Yeah, bye, everybody.
Later, folks.